Handle some last-minute gift shopping by going over to logi.gg/Datto and use code Datto10 to save some money on your next Logitech purchase. Guardians. This new Equilibrium dungeon is going to be one of the easier solo dungeons you are going to experience. The strategies are pretty similar between the classes, and there's only a couple of small differences you'll need to be aware of, on top of this place not really being too mechanically dense. So, let's get into it. As for which class I recommend you do this on, I honestly don't think it matters that much. Each class can handle this place without too much issue and without it taking a super long time. Titans can get it done a little bit faster due to their build, but Warlocks and Hunters can get it done in maybe an extra phase per fight. I would say play the class that you are the best at, because it's not going to make that much of a difference. Build-wise, you can run some of the builds that I'm going to suggest here for the entire dungeon unless you want to make swaps of your own volition. The first encounter does not need a specific build, so if you have a build that you prefer for the purposes of doing that encounter, go for it. Otherwise, you can just use what I'm going to tell you here. Titans, throw on Wormgod Caress, throw on Solar with non-consecration aspects, Fragments should be juiced for Radiant and Restoration, and put on a Tractor Cannon. This is all you will need for the entire run. Wormgod Hammer Throws are doing obscene amounts of damage at high stacks. You should be one-shotting every non-boss target that walks in front of you if you have, I don't know, like 2 or 3 stacks of Wormgod. My build for this, my setup that I did, was just another build, my Wishful Ignorance strand setup with the gloves swapped for Wormgod, and then I just swapped to Solar, and then I adjusted a few of my armor mods to fit. That's it. I didn't make a special curated build for this. I literally just took a thing that I already had, and I just swapped it over. Warlocks, El Clasico Prismatic Getaway Artist is still one of the best builds in the game, and it's going to treat you very well here. Put on Song of Flame, Bleak Watcher, Feed the Void with Facet of Purpose, grab your choice of Rocket Pulse, it basically does not matter, although Elemental Honing is encouraged. Grab a solid primary of any kind, bonus points for Heal Clip if you feel like you need it, which you likely won't, but why not? And then finally, your weapon is going to be Wolfsbane, the exotic axe from the Ashen Iron update, that exotic mission, with the Attrition Orbs catalyst installed to generate an unlimited supply of orbs. This lets you heal with Recuperation, the leg mod. It lets you keep the surge buffs up. It lets you trigger Restoration with Facet of Purpose. It lets you do so many solo-friendly things. Hunters, you can also boot up Prismatic. I ran with Deadshot Tether, Ascension, and GPG with Facet of Purpose, Facet of Dawn, and a couple of other things shown here. And then throw on the new exotic, Fortune's Favor, the exotic that you get at the end of the Renegades campaign. This is a pretty boring exotic, but it is a flat damage boost for basically all of the time that you are going to be in here. That's because you too will be using Wolfsbane with Attrition Orbs. You are running the same thing as Warlocks. Rocket Pulse, good primary, or even a second Rocket Pulse if you really wanted to, and Wolfsbane with Attrition Orbs. Not only is Tether going to give us a debuff, Facet of Purpose will trigger the Void effect, which is Overshield, which links with Fortune's Favor's main effect, which gives the damage boost and keeps you alive. If you don't like GPG, feel free to switch it with something else. That is fine. Warlocks and Hunters can absolutely consider using the dungeon armor as well, since it has a lot of sword-based bonuses on it, but I completed the solo dungeon on all 3 characters without using any of that armor. Yes, there are other builds and setups available. Controverse Warlock, I know. Feel free to drop any of those builds in the comments if you would like. But these setups, I feel, are the easiest to navigate. Equipment-wise, most people still playing the game probably have these items and or they are easily accessed by playing the game right now. I know this is an easier dungeon to solo, but it is still a solo dungeon, so there is an expectation that you are going to have some decent gear going into this. I also don't like doing any sort of armor swaps in the middle of fights for the purposes of these videos, just to keep things as simple as possible, so there will be none of that here, so don't worry about it. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with the dungeon mechanics already, because you should be. I usually talk about what is going to kill you in each encounter, so let's review that. The first encounter, what is going to kill you here? Honestly, number one for me is hubris. I know this place is easy. But if you try to kill too many of the nameless without having a way of dealing with how many enemies are going to be in this area, you're going to run into some issues. Titan has this the easiest because they can just one-shot everything and have restoration going the entire time. Warlocks and Hunters, you just need to weave killing the behemoths and the nameless so that there's maybe just not as much on the screen. As a result, you might need to do 2 Sparrow cycles, not the end of the world. This is the first encounter though, so if there is a place to take some amount of risks to save a little bit of time, it would be here if you really want to. Oh, Warlocks, Hunters, something that's going to be super annoying for this place is the fact that you cannot switch to Shadow Punch while you're Transcendent. So you are going to need to navigate that however you can. Warlocks and Hunters have really good grenades, right? Arc Buddy, dropping the Bleak Watcher, GPG does a ton of damage. So you should get familiar with swapping between Shadow Punch and Grenade. Otherwise, life is going to get kind of annoying in this place. Titans don't need to worry about this as much unless you find yourself very desperate for Healing Grenade a lot of the time, which you shouldn't. I did not even run with Healing Grenade for the entirety of this dungeon. I don't think you need it, but it's there if you want it. What else is going to kill you here? The drop pods. The delivery of the behemoths after you kill a nameless. Don't stand in the spots where they drop, which is just a few meters away from the satellites towards the ship in the middle. Just don't be there. Just don't be there, ever. That's how you avoid dying, is just don't stand there. I honestly can't think of anything else that's really going to kill you here besides mechanics. Like, yeah, if you slow down or don't pick up the shadows in the Sparrow section, you're going to die, but that's just the mechanics working, right? This encounter is really easy as far as solo dungeon encounters go. Just don't bite off more than you can chew, and you're going to be fine. The second encounter is where you're really going to start using those loadouts. In terms of the encounter itself, there's really not that much to say. You got to hit all 9 panels, so you just got to walk yourself around to all the rooms and get it done. It's not that big of a deal. You should have plenty of the shadow buffs to work with. And I would also prep the main damage room with the 3 electrified turbines, or like whatever they're called, for bonus time on the boss. I've also had situations where I just don't end up removing the shield in time for whatever reason, so having those there and active is helpful. What is going to kill you here? My number one might be getting pinched in the doorways and getting flung into a wall, going to 1 HP, and then getting shot. Or any sort of physics-induced deaths, like the boss slices you into a wall while you're moving and you go to 1 HP, something like that. It is totally possible to die to the ads here, though, at least in the middle room specifically. Maybe you're waiting for the boss to finally drop in the pit and he's just not cooperating and you're getting hit a lot, you're ignoring the ads. Maybe you fall in the pit yourself. That's possible. It's very low chance, but, you know, just be careful. I fell in. That thing opened so fast. The boss's explosion does hurt a bit more than the regular nameless, so that is definitely something to watch for as well. But with the amount of defense that every character has, I really don't think you should be dying too much. Okay, so you make it to damage. What's the deal? Well, first, make sure you're hitting those 2 shadow punches that you gotta hit to remove the shield after they fall in the pit. It is very easy to forget, and it's also very easy to just not have one of the punches register. You gotta be really close and on target, and your timing's gotta be good. As soon as he changes color, as soon as he turns like Taken or whatever, hit that first punch because the window is very, very short. Okay, now it's damage time. Titans. You will have hopefully primed your wormgod to maximum stacks as they are falling into the second pit. Hopefully an enemy has patrolled nearby to help you out. You boop with the tractor cannon and you mash hammer. You mash until there is nothing left. If you plan on using all the extra stuns in a cycle, I don't think it's the worst idea to try to go refresh your wormgod meter a little bit if there are enemies in the room already. Do not leave the room in pursuit of refreshing your meter though. Just use your rocket pulse, use regular hammer at 0 stacks. It does not matter, just do that. Your damage is going to be front loaded here due to wormgod. You're going to chunk this boss at the start and then it's going to cool off. I tried to position myself in a corner so that the boss wouldn't be flinging me everywhere, and it sort of worked, but my hammer still had a whiff or two just because of how the boss can lunge at you or like teleport through you or something like that. Warlocks and Hunters operate in a very similar way. First, make sure you have charged your wolfsbane axe before damage. That is very easy to forget. Next, you have a lot of buttons you can push before the damage phase starts, but again, you lose access to Shadow Punch while Transcendent. meaning you can't pop Transcendence while waiting for the boss to jump out of the pit. You just gotta wait until you've landed both punches, and then you can do it. You could just use a turbine to start the damage phase, though, if you want some extra time to prepare. I think that's totally fine. Warlocks, you Shadow Punch. You Shadow Punch again. Hopefully the shield is gone. Then you hit your bind to switch to your regular grenade. You pop out a Bleak Watcher, you pop out an Arc Buddy, then you gotta pop Song of Flame, then you gotta use Transcendence, then you gotta take out the axe, then you gotta hold whatever your button is to activate Nano Assault on the axe, and then you start damage. That's a lot of stuff to do before you actually start dealing damage, to the point where I would honestly practice the buttons outside of this encounter first to make sure you got it. For the axe, while you're in Nano Assault mode, 2 lights and a heavy, I believe, is the way to go. Although if you're watching this while Renegades is the newest expansion and we have that juiced up sword artifact, make sure you're doing all of the other sword stuff that is available in the artifact. Like 3 lights and a heavy gets you that AoE thing that's going on, that's dealing some extra damage. Hunters is a very similar pattern. Shadow Punch 2 times. You drop your tether. You pop Transcendence. You maybe throw a grenade at his face if you want to. Toss your melee for a little bit of Radiant if you got Faceted Dawn. Maybe pop Ascension pre-damage. Take out the axe. Activate Nano Assault. Go nuts. A lot of buttons pre-DPS. I'm sure there's some min-maxing in terms of what's worth it, what's not worth it. But either way, if you do your damage close to correct, you're only going to be here for like 3 damage cycles anyway. You're going to be making plenty of orbs, so don't worry if you don't have an overshield going into the damage phase. You will get one very shortly after starting, unless you're starting the damage phase at like 2 health, which hopefully you're not doing that. On final stand, please let the boss go first. The boss will launch you into orbit if you get in front of him and he jumps at you. Otherwise, I would say this is the scariest part of the fight because of the Shielded Centurion spawning in, and because there's just not that much space. So play it cautiously here. Use all of the resources in this area, and you're going to be fine. The final boss is a little more intense, but given how safe every class can play this, I think dying to regular enemies is very low on the how you're going to die list. In terms of handling this fight, this is going to be a longer experience than the other 2 combined, but definitely nowhere near some of the previous dungeon final bosses, right? Like Vesper or something like that. Setup phases are going to be a few minutes long if you want the longest damage phase possible, which most people are going to want. Fortunately, a 3 phase is very much in the realm of possibility here. 4 phases if you're playing it as safe as possible. Starting out, get your Shadow Punch as fast as you can to start working on the Nameless. Rocket Pulse works great for the boss's Tickle Fingers, which should be a priority because it's the one thing that you cannot avoid in terms of damage. I know it doesn't hurt at the start of the cast, but just deal with it as soon as possible. I think Warlock and Hunter can do 4 compels and 1 kill for 1 damage phase, and then the other 2, hopefully 2, can be 5 and 0. This damage phase I did on Hunter didn't quite reach the 1 kill HP threshold on the health bar, but it sailed past the 0 kill threshold, which is why I was able to do this in 3 phases. Otherwise, 5 compels would have resulted in a 4 phase, which isn't like the end of the world or anything. I'm sure there's some math to do to determine what's a better use of my time going for compels versus kills versus dealing with the aftermath of the arena and it being all electrified. But at least one 4-1 setup will net you a 3 phase, provided that your damage is up to par. Titan, on the other hand, just beats the crap out of this boss. I did 4 compels, 1 kill for 2 phases, and I almost killed the boss with what I would call decent damage phases. So if I did a 4-1 and then maybe like a 3 compel, 2 kill, and then I had good damage phases, I could 2-cycle this boss. In terms of how to start damage, I definitely prefer to kill the final taken orb in the normal realm and then going into damage because you can just set up a bit easier. The only issue with that is that you might get teleported a lot more and spend more time in the encounter if you don't have good Blighted Shadow RNG. Like if they're spread out really far and you can't easily access the shadow pools. This is a bigger deal for Titan in my opinion. I think Warlock and Hunter can deal with teleporting into a damage phase much easier because Titan needs to worry about high stacks of wormgod, and they fall off really quick, so every second counts. Again, Warlock, Hunter, you got a lot of setup, especially if you're entering from the Ascendant realm. Warlock is dropping a turret and an Arc Buddy, popping Song, popping Trans, taking out the axe, activate it, swing it. However, the boss will use Tickle Fingers pretty early on in the damage phase, which works out in our favor because by the time both warlocks and hunters are done activating all the stuff that they gotta activate, Tickle Fingers should be starting up. So shut that down with the rocket pulse immediately, then switch to your axe, then activate it, then go to town. This way, you don't waste any of that precious axe timer. Oh, and hunters, I would just tether the ground. Don't risk sending your tether into a wall just because you want to hit the boss for a couple thousand damage. It's not that big of a deal. When it comes to the boss's knockback, you need to watch the boss animation. There's even some sound cues, I believe, and make sure you are doing light attacks with the axe when the slam is coming. If you're doing a heavy attack, the boss will knock you back, but if you're spamming light, you will lunge right back to the boss and not lose any time on damage. It is just better to do a bunch of light swings to avoid the knockback and then do a heavy after the animation's over versus getting knocked away, potentially into the lightning, and potentially dying. Titans, you live and die by the hammer. If you fling your hammer away, grab a rocket pulse and get to shooting, although even, again, uncharged melees are going to do some work here. You too will want to be point blank, but make sure you have uncharged melee bound to something, because that will be the way that you stick close to the boss without getting knocked around. You will not really have the luxury of rebuilding wormgod stacks unless you get some doggies nearby, but you're probably going to have sunspots just killing them off. Also, do not pop super unless you have nothing else going on, and even then, I'm not sure you should. I would use it to exit the damage phase safely, because your hammers in your super do not count for dealing damage to the boss's hands when they're doing tickle fingers. And let me tell you, that super can last a really long time, and you might get into trouble if you can't actually hit the boss's hands. All that being said, you can take advantage of tickle fingers on all of the classes, but it is a bit riskier. While the boss is doing that attack, they're not going to knock you around. They're just going to stand there. And all of the classes have a ton of healing and defense, meaning this attack is not really going to hurt for quite a while. So you can tank a little bit here to get in some carefree damage. That being said, I wouldn't push it too much here, especially if you're still flawless, because the hands take much more damage to get rid of while he's in this phase. And if that damage starts ramping and you don't have a way of dealing with it, you might be in trouble. Exiting the damage phase depends on if you met the threshold. If you did, it's probably pretty chill, continue as normal. If you didn't, it's going to add a bunch of time onto your run, and I would suggest doing nothing in the Ascendant realm other than getting Shadow Master to bring back to the normal realm to make the place habitable. If you have the brain capacity to rebuff yourself immediately before damage, you should have Shadow Master for a few seconds after damage ends, which means you should be able to kill something to refresh your timer after damage ends. And if you can do that, that's going to be a huge time saver, especially if you have to deal with the lightning. What is going to kill you here? I think Tickle Fingers and not respecting it is going to be up there, especially during the damage phase, and especially when the room is full of lightning after a damage phase. That's dangerous because you might get distracted, you're trying to get to safety, you're trying to find some buffs, all of a sudden you're behind a wall, you can't shoot the boss, and you're getting tickled to death. Next would be platforming mishaps and or getting booped or knocked around by Incendiors or the Nameless, especially you Warlocks. Like the Nameless lunging at you while you're jumping or something like that, that's going to send you far, far away. That or the boss knocking you into lightning during the damage phase, or the Nameless running up to you during the damage phase and exploding. That can be really annoying. It shouldn't outright kill you, but it's gonna hurt. Considering how many defensive options all the classes have though, you should not be dying to adds. Titan has a ton of resto, Hunter should have a near permanent overshield, and Warlock has Devour. Adds should be a near non-issue. That's what I got for you on this dungeon. It is not nearly as difficult as the previous two dungeon solos, and Sundered Doctrine itself was not that bad. I don't know if I want to go as far as saying that it's a good entry-level solo dungeon experience, but of the most recent 3 dungeons, it is the easiest solo for sure. Good luck in there. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.